So I have a garden this year, and I have a bunch of tomato plants, and I have a few tomato trellises that I've picked up over the years, but I need a few more. And I'm finding that it's a little late in the season to be buying them, and buying them ends up being expensive, especially if you need a few. If you need one or two, it's not a big deal, but if you need 20, it ends up being a lot. So I got some cedar fence boards, and I thought I could rip those down into strips to make the trellises. Now I ripped them so the width of the rip was about the same as the thickness of the fence board, so that I ended up with a square. Now this was going to give me fairly thin pieces to work with, but I thought I could figure out a way for that to work. I had wondered at the beginning whether doing sort of a cone shape would make sense, but I wasn't sure that was going to work for pushing the bottoms or the stakes into the ground, as they're wood and not very bendable. So I ended up just making the vertical parts vertical instead of at an angle. I basically made a box. So I needed to figure out what size that would be. So I measured, and I kind of got a sense of that. Now I realize measuring the plants as they are now is sort of silly because they're going to grow, hopefully. But I could get an idea for what would fit at this point, and I could make them somewhat similar to the trellises that I have. So what I figured out was that I could take my 6-foot strips and cut them in half and get 3-foot pieces to make the trellises 3 feet tall. And they'll be a little bit less than that once they're in place because some of that goes into the ground. And I marked where I wanted the horizontal pieces. I thought at first I'd have 2 rings, but I decided 3 would be a little better, or made more sense anyways. Now I cut dados into the vertical pieces, and I thought I would use those to help put these together as the horizontals would then fall into place. And I could cut the horizontals, and I made those a foot long so that I could get 6 out of my 6-foot pieces. So it'll be a foot by 3 feet, or 300 millimeters by 900 millimeters, roughly. So I put the first one together, and it went together just fine. What I was thinking was that the pieces that run between the first 2 sides that I made would have a bunch of bearing surface because they'd be on the vertical part and the end of the other horizontals, and I could get 2 nails into that surface. The overall structure ended up feeling a little too loose, a little too wiggly. So this is what that detail looks like. So there's just a dado on one side. So what I thought I'd try next is to put a dado on the sides of the verticals, just like I had, then rotate the verticals and put a dado on the 2 other sides. So there'd be 2 dados on each vertical piece. And it took a little thinking to figure out how to rotate them so that the second set of dados would fall in the right place. But it worked out in the end. So I could cut that second set of dados. Now I had wondered about putting the second set right where the first set was, but that would make the vertical piece right at that point really thin. And I thought that might be a problem. So I offset the second set of dados, or notches. So this second trellis did seem a little stiffer than the first one. I think that second dado does help. So this is what that detail looks like. Now the last thing I thought I would try is to do the same detail I just done, but to put a ravet at the end of the horizontal pieces. And I put that together. So you can see how that detail goes together. And that notch at the end of the horizontals helped even more with having the pieces sort of fall into place. And this seems stiff too. I don't think it was really a whole lot better than the second one, but it made it easier to put together. And this is what that detail looks like. Now what's really going to hold these up and keep them rigid is to push them into the ground. So I needed to put points on the bottom, and I had forgotten to do this before I put them together. So I did it on the disc sander, which worked pretty well. Now that I've got a system worked out, I can do the rest of them, and hopefully fairly quickly. I figured out that I can make one trellis from 4 of my 6-foot strips. So I can cut 2 of them in half to get the 4 verticals. Then I can cut the other 2 into the 1-foot pieces for the horizontals. And I'm cutting a whole bunch at once here. Now for the little rabbet at the end, for these I set up a stop, which made it go much quicker. So I could just bring those right up to the stop block and cut the end. So really, as intricate as this detail might seem, it actually goes really quickly because you can cut a whole bunch at once and it's really fast on the radial arm saw. And this time I remembered to do the points on the vertical ones. So I just freehanded those on the radial arm saw. Now I can start putting them together, and it's starting to go quicker now as I have a pretty good system down. And now I can take them out to the garden. I had thought I might take a scrap piece of wood and a hammer and sort of pound these in, but I found I could just put weight on the 4 corners sort of evenly and just push them into the ground. Now, I'll be happy if these last a season, and it'd be great if they'd last until next year. But if they don't, it was a fun little experiment. Now, once I had these in and thinking about it, it sort of makes more sense to maybe make a system instead of making individual trellises. So I'd have sort of a grid of something over the tomato plants to capture all of them instead of just one at a time. But maybe next year. Now they're a little wonky looking, but I think I have happier tomato plants. Thanks for watching.